I tried to dress straight for this video, let me know if I succeeded. I have no idea when this video is going to be released, but as of filming, it has been almost exactly 2 weeks since the white supremacist attack on the US Capitol. You know, the inauguration's tomorrow, so I'm sure nothing bad will happen there. But just to be clear, what happened on January 6th was not a protest. I'd even argue riot is too soft of a term. It was an attack and an attempt to perform a coup. That should not be controversial. So why is a film channel, making a video so political after making 2 videos that got maybe 50 views and are barely related to this topic at all? Well, because it's my channel and I want to, but also because I think what happened on January 6th says a lot about the United States' reputation and how that is portrayed on film. American exceptionalism is the idea that the United States is somehow different and better than every other country. Many movies have been made that depict how incredible and resilient the United States is. They do tend to be action movies, though there are some dramas and comedies thrown in there as well. There are 2 main problems with American exceptionalism. You know, there are a whole lot more, but there's 2 that are relevant to what I'm talking about. So one is that it is an excuse for Americans to ignore the glaring issues that pervade American culture, government, etc. The other is that it incentivizes people to forcibly share this culture with other cultures who usually don't want or need it. Whenever we go to war, we spin this narrative about how we are spreading democracy. And while in a vacuum, this is not necessarily egregious, the problem is that the American system is fundamentally flawed, and our efforts to spread this show themselves as war and propaganda. So how does this all relate to movies? The best propaganda doesn't register as propaganda to most people. It is art, speech, rhetoric, articles, etc. that appeal to the masses, you know, and bonus points if it's entertaining. Portraying American exceptionalism on screen is inherently propagandic. Being patriotic is one thing, but proclaiming that the United States is somehow better than every other nation or, you know, virtually flawless is a whole other thing. In the 1984 film Red Dawn, Soviet forces along with their allies invade the United States. The film depicts a fantasy of mostly a group of untrained high schoolers enacting guerrilla warfare against the invaders. The film ends on a bittersweet note where the United States remains invaded, but there is a strong message about how it will come back stronger than ever. Red Dawn was a massive success upon release, grossing $38 million on a $17 million budget. It even got a remake in 2012 that nobody saw, despite the fact that post-Thor Chris Hemsworth was the lead.
The guy sitting behind the show, he's Russian.
This movie was released near the end of the Cold War, when tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were high. This movie was primarily made to make people afraid of the Soviet Union. This movie is alarmist, propagandic, and it appealed to exactly who they needed it to. Aspiring military dudes who don't really understand what war actually is. While there are movies that delve into the actual effects of war on someone's psyche and mental health, Hollywood tends to have a problem where they depict war as heroic, noble, and cool. It's aspirational to go to war because you get to show off how manly you are. Who cares if there's a good chance you'll die, or that you'll commit murder, or that you'll get PTSD? Look at how big his guns are. This isn't a closely guarded Hollywood secret or anything, but I feel like I should say it. The YouTube channel Pop Culture Detective made a video where he analyzed the marketing tactic used by the film Independence Day Resurgence. There was a website tied to the marketing where people, mostly teenage boys, could go and play games related to military duties. The website was hosted by the US Army and was used as marketing for the Army. There's a whole issue here about the morals of the marketing that the Army uses that he dives into, but it's not really the point of this video. The point I'm trying to make here is that movies movies make war look fun. They make it look like a game. American identity is fundamentally tied to the military. So many of our most popular movies depict the military in some way. Casablanca, Top Gun, Forrest Gump, American Sniper, etc., etc. And how they depict the military differs, but the point is that we like to make movies about the military. And then when you think of patriotic movies, you think of military movies. You think about movies about the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the Iraqi War, the Afghanistani War. Let us discuss the difference between patriotism and jingoism. Patriotism is the undying support and love for your country. Jingoism is similar, but it is also very extremist, volatile, and xenophobic. I think the term patriotism has a marketing problem. The way most of us view patriots are the US flag wearing hillbillies who chant USA when it's not really appropriate. That is not what patriotism is. Patriotism is much more nuanced and refined than that. Patriotism is not unquestioning faith in your country. It is not blindly following your country wherever it may take you. Patriotism is simply wanting the best for your country. And you know what that requires sometimes? Tough love, criticism, revolution. I think a good reference point is the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. This movie was released in 1939 to high acclaim from critics, but also extreme controversy due to its depiction of corrupt politicians. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington depicts a well-meaning but naive senator of an unnamed state who is tricked into signing a bill based on fraud. So then he is forced to go to Washington to plead his innocence in front of Congress. I'm not going to dive deep into the politics of this movie, but I think this is a better depiction of a patriotic movie than what we usually see. It has aged because, it was released in 1939, but this movie is not saying that the United States is infallible or indestructible or uncorrupt. This movie is very well aware that the United States is all of those things, but it also believes that the United States can be so much more. Now, the way I'm talking about this makes it sound like I'm one of those we're better than this people, which I'm not, because we aren't, but I do believe that the United States can possibly be more than it is right now. I want to talk about an example of the slew of jingoist media that pervades our culture. Let's talk about White House Has Fallen Down, which is not a movie. It is a meshed name of two similarly plotted movies released in 2013, White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen. White House Down depicts Channing Tatum rescuing Jamie Foxx from a group of terrorists led by Jason Clarke, which is a threesome I desperately want to see. Okay, sorry, this video is supposed to be more serious. And then Olympus Has Fallen shows Gerard Butler rescuing Aaron Eckhart from a group of terrorists led by Rick Yoon, which is an even better threesome. God damn it. Okay, but tangent. In all seriousness, Gerard Butler, you're not watching this. But if at any point you are, you're very hot, but pick better movies. One kind of darkly funny thing about these movies is that the White House is invaded by tactically trained teams of military people who have been planning this for months. And then on January 6th, 2021, a group of nobodies invaded the Capitol with very little resistance. I'm just saying. Why did two very similar movies get released in 2013? Well, I don't have the answer to that. My best guess is that 2012 was an election year, and that was when these movies went into production, and two studio heads were like, hey, what if we made a really unpatriotic, patriotic movie? And then they kissed. So why do I consider this movie jingoist? Well, it kind of depicts the police in a very positive way. Gerard Butler in Olympus Has Fallen is Secret Service, and Channing Tatum in White House Down is a Capitol Police officer. When this movie was released, the idea of portraying hero cops was not nearly as controversial as it is now. A good portion of people still ignored police brutality against black people or considered it a necessary evil. There are so many implications there, but I do not feel like leading that discussion. However, they cast sex symbols to play these cops. They portrayed them as hyper-competent and extra badass, dedicated to fighting for America above all else. These movies are fantasies, as we discussed, but when you portray police like this, it adds to this ever-pervading notion that police are heroes, which nowadays so many people are seeing the holes in that. The reason these types of movies are jingoist is that it is propaganda for the establishment. Revolution never ends up working out. The revolutionaries are typically extremists, but that's kind of the point. These movies are so dead set on upholding American ideals that they portray any challenge to that as extremist and not worth considering. They don't learn anything from these revolutionaries, they just survive them. Compare this to something like Black Panther, where the main villain is an extremist, terroristic revolutionary, but he has a point about the system he is revolting against, and the characters learn from that. These jingoist movies have no interest in learning or progressing the United States. They're simply interested in appealing to the masses, and they use American exceptionalism to appeal to the masses. And in 2021, when the cracks of the American experiment are finally showing themselves in all their glory, these movies find themselves dated beyond repair. This type of propaganda doesn't work for a large chunk of people anymore. While there will always be people who considered everything to be better before whiny SJWs like Martin Luther King Jr. came around, the cracks are still there. And once you can see the cracks, they're not going away. I'm curious to see how Warren police will be portrayed now. You know, I'm sure there'll be some stragglers desperately holding on to this idea of America that get released in the years coming. But I don't know if they'll do that well. Or maybe they will and I'll look like a fool, but it's okay because no one will see this video. For the 0.5 straight men watching this, I'm not suggesting we get rid of war movies. You can have your masturbation fodder. What I'm saying is that we have to reanalyze how we portray war on film. We have to stop romanticizing it, and we have to show what the reality of it is. This video is supposed to be about American exceptionalism, and I've spent way too much time talking about the military. When are you going to get back to the point, you little twink? Well, as I said earlier, American identity is tied to the military. So I want you to imagine your high school bully. Yes, the one who made fun of you for being gay, and then you imagined getting railed by him behind the bleachers. Or is that just me? What was the thing that a lot of parents, teachers, etc. told us about bullies to make us feel better? That their life must be pretty sad if they're devoted to making fun of us this much. That's the United States. We are falling apart, and instead of addressing the inherent problems with our system, we attack other countries and the less fortunate to make ourselves feel bigger. That is why we spend so much on the military. That is why we portray the military as cool. It's not for our protection, it's a dick measuring contest. And so Hollywood keeps making these movies about the military to appeal to these people, the ones who need to feel like they're bigger. And so these people will then join the military, get it funded more, and then Hollywood will keep propagandizing. It's a cycle. It's not really these people's fault that they think serving the military is badass. It is the US government's fault. It is the military's fault, and it is Hollywood's fault. To be clear, I'm not saying that military service is bad and that anyone who does serve is stupid. What I'm saying is that the military preys upon these people to keep itself large, and Hollywood is culpable in that. And what is the point of the military? To uphold and spread American ideals. They're spreading the United States propaganda. I'm highly critical of the United States. We spend too much on the military, we expose people to propaganda from a young age, and we're hopelessly corrupt. This blatant jingoism is something that we have to cleanse ourselves of. However, I'm going to go on the record and say that I consider myself a patriot. I want the best for this country. I can't see myself living anywhere but here, and I imagine a lot of people feel the same way. Or maybe Joe Biden will, out of left field, re-ban gay and interracial marriage, and I'll have to move to New Zealand, and I'll be mocked. But let's hope that doesn't happen. Hollywood has a responsibility to adapt to the times, and if they keep portraying the military in the way they have been, we'll see what happens. Thank you to the 50 people who will watch this. Go ahead and give it a dislike, maybe comment how much you hate it, and subscribe just for fun. Wear a mask, get the vaccine as soon as you can. Good night.